Let's continue our coverage this afternoon of the incident at Manchester Airport. A police officer from Greater Manchester Police has been suspended after footage appeared online which showed a man being kicked in the head and stamped on. The force said that 3 officers had been injured in an altercation, and they claimed that there was a clear risk firearms were going to be taken away from the officers who were carrying weapons. Well, let's bring in former Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police, Dal Babu, for his thoughts on this. Dal Babu, really good to speak with you, as always. Thanks for making the time this afternoon. What did you make of that footage when you saw it?
Well, Kamali, I was sent the footage by multiple people from across the world, in fact, not just in this country. I think it was pretty shocking. I think the level of force used was not proportionate, and it was not reasonable. What you had was a man in a prone position, lying on the floor, face down, with his hands behind his back. The reasonable thing to do at that stage would be to handcuff him. But instead, the officer has then kicked him in the face, and these are, if you look at the substantial boots that these officers wear, he's kicked him in the face and then stamped on his head a couple of times. He's then gone off to another officer, another person, and he's dragged him to the floor, kicked him on the legs, and then struck him on the back of the head with his taser gun. So, this was totally disproportionate amount of force used, and I hear what's been said around what happened, the incident, and I don't know what happened in the incident before. I know an officer had their nose broken. I know officers were assaulted, and clearly that's not acceptable. But the video clip that has gone viral is the one where the individual was lying in a prone position, face down, hands behind him, and that would have been the ideal time to handcuff him, and then the prisoner is neutralised and can be dealt with. But instead of doing that, while the hands were being presented, the officer decided to kick them in the face and then stamp on the head, and that's not acceptable.
And Dal, look, you will have heard, and we haven't seen all the footage you say, there was something that happened in the lead-up to all of this. There is a backstory to it. But we've seen that footage of the man on the ground being kicked in the face. Where in policing is that the kind of thing that you do to someone that you have on the ground who is prone like that?
There is no circumstances whatsoever I can think of where you've got a person lying prone, face down, hands behind their back. There is no instances where it is acceptable, and anybody who suggests that that's acceptable doesn't actually know what they're talking about. And I think what we need to understand is, why didn't the officer at that point, and there were other officers running around, why didn't they handcuff the person at that point? That could have been neutralised, and that's what people are concerned about, is why somebody was being kicked in the head and stamped on. It just seemed wholly inappropriate. And I think we also need to understand, Kamari, that this is not a family of yobs. Their brother is a police officer. They have other members of the family in the police family. This is a pro-policing family. This is a family that holds the police in great esteem. And what we actually saw there was somebody who had disproportionate force used for them. And there are I cannot think of any circumstances where a prisoner is prone, presented their hands behind their back, and is ready for handcuffing. I cannot think of any circumstances where it would be appropriate to kick him in the head and then stamp on the head.
And Dal, you'll know that in the hours after that footage appeared online, there was a protest outside Rochdale Police Station, and many in the Muslim community are upset at what they saw in that footage online. Do you think race has played an issue in this?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, ultimately there'll be an investigation, but I don't think you can dismiss race. I saw there's one particular footage where there's a woman in her 40s or 50s wearing a saval and kameez, traditional Indian dress with a chunni, a headdressing, and she's been pushed around by the police officers. She was very lucky that she didn't fall flat on her face because of the way she was being treated, and she was trying to calm things down. So I do wonder whether this team of officers, what understanding they have around culture. I think the other thing to bear in mind, it's very, very important. It's only been a matter of weeks before Dame Baird did a investigation into GMP's attitude towards women that looked at sexism and misogyny in the custody suite. this is just a matter of days after this has happened. So, I think GMP has got a culture problem. It's got a problem around issues around race. It's got problems around misogyny and sexism. So, politicians stop being defensive, look at the facts, look at Dame Baird's report into misogyny and sexism, which is literally days old, and then look at this incident. I think it's really, really important that we deal with this effectively. I would think it's a time for people to be calm, and I think the fact that the police officer has been suspended is a good sign, but that should have happened from day one. You didn't need to be a rocket scientist to look at that thing and think, well, that's appropriate. I cannot think of any circumstances where striking somebody in the head and then stamping on them when they're lying face down with their hands behind their back, ready to be handcuffed, is appropriate.